In all the states of Greece, in the earliest as in later times, the general type of their military organization was the phalanx, a body of troops in close array with a long spear as their principal weapon. It was among the Dorians, and especially among the Spartans, that this type was most rigidly adhered to. The strength of their military array consisted in the heavy-armed infantry, hoplitei. They attached comparatively small importance to their cavalry, which was always inferior. Indeed, the Thessalians and Boeotians were the only Greek people who distinguished themselves much for their cavalry. Scarcely any other states had territories adapted for the evolutions of warriors on horseback. The whole life of a Spartan was little else than either the preparation for or the practice of war. The result was that in the strictness of their discipline, the precision and facility with which they performed their military evolutions, and the skill and power with which they used their weapons, the Spartans were unrivaled among the Greeks. The heavy-armed infantry of the Spartan armies was composed partly of genuine Spartan citizens, partly of perioeci. Every Spartan citizen was liable to military service, emphruros, from the age of 20 to the age of 60 years. They were divided into 6 divisions called morai, under the command or superintendence of a polemarch, each mora being subdivided into 4 lochoi, commanded by lokagoi, each lochos into 2 pentekastes, headed by pentekastres, each pentekastes into 2 enomotiai, headed by enomotarchs. The enomotiai were so called from the men composing them being bound together by a common oath. These were not merely divisions of troops engaged in actual military expeditions. The whole body of citizens at all times formed an army, whether they were congregated at headquarters in Sparta, or a portion of them were detached on foreign service. The strength of a mora on actual service, of course, varied according to circumstances. To judge by the name Pentekostes, the normal number of a mora would have been 400. But 500, 600, and 900 are mentioned as the number of men in a mora on different occasions. When in the field, each mora of infantry was attended by a mora of cavalry, consisting at the most of 100 men, and commanded by an hipparmosts. Plutarch mentions squadrons, oulamoi, of 50, which may possibly be the same divisions. The cavalry seems merely to have been employed to protect the flanks, and but little regard was paid to it. The corps of 300 hippaeus formed a sort of bodyguard for the king, and consisted of the flower of the young soldiers. Though called horsemen, they fought on foot. A Spartan army, divided as above described, was drawn up in the dense array of the phalanx, the depth of which depended upon circumstances. An enomotia sometimes made but a single file, sometimes was drawn up in 3 or 6 files, zyga. The enomotarch stood at the head of his file, protostates, or at the head of the right-hand file, if the enomotia was broken up into more than one. The last man was called ouragos. It was a matter of great importance that he, like the enomotarch, should be a man of strength and skill, as in certain evolutions he would have to lead the movements. The commander-in-chief, who was usually the king, had his station sometimes in the center, more commonly on the right wing. The commands of the general were issued in the first place to the polemarchs, by these to the lokagoi, by these again to the pentekastres, by the latter to the enomotarchs, and by these last to their respective divisions. From the orderly manner in which this was done, commands were transmitted with great rapidity. Every soldier, in fact, regulating the movements of the man behind him, every 2 being connected together as protostates and epistats. In later times the king was usually accompanied by 2 ephors, as controllers and advisers. These, with the polemarchs, the 4 pythii, 3 peers, homoioi, who had to provide for the necessities of the king in war, the lapharopoli and some other officers, constituted what was called the demosia of the king. The Spartan hoplites were accompanied in the field by helots, partly in the capacity of attendants, partly to serve as light-armed troops. The number attached to an army was probably not uniform. At Platae each Spartan was accompanied by 7 helots, but that was probably an extraordinary case. One helot in particular of those attached to each Spartan was called his therapan, and performed the functions of an armorer or shield-bearer. Xenophon calls them hypaspistae. In extraordinary cases, helots served as hoplites, and in that case it was usual to give them their liberty. A separate troop in the Lacedaemonian army was formed by the Sciritae, originally, no doubt, inhabitants of the district Siritis. The arms of the phalanx consisted of the long spear and a short sword, xioli. The chief part of the defensive armor was the large brazen shield, which covered the body from the shoulder to the knee, suspended, as in ancient times, by a thong round the neck, and managed by a simple handle or ring, porpax. Besides this, they had the ordinary armor of the hoplite. The heavy-armed soldiers wore a scarlet uniform. The Spartan encampments were circular. Only the heavy-armed were stationed within them, the cavalry being placed to look out, and the helots being kept as much as possible outside. Preparatory to a battle, the Spartan soldier dressed his hair and crowned himself as others would do for a feast. The signal for attack was given not by the trumpet, but by the music of flutes, and sometimes also of the lyre and kithara, to which the men sang the battle song, Pian Embaterios. The object of the music was not so much to inspirit the men, as simply to regulate the march of the phalanx. This rhythmical regularity of movement was a point to which the Spartans attached great importance. If you have enjoyed this audiobook, please consider supporting the channel in one or more of the following ways.